Over the past couple of days, I received emails from people wanting me to make a specific kind of video. And because it was more than one person, I figured, no, the need must really be out there at this point. It's always been, wasn't exactly sure how to address it, but I'm going to take a stab at it here. It was written, two people asking about, or basically telling me that, they get really lousy support from people around them. One was talking about a cousin who just basically was saying he was stupid for smoking, and that's their way of encouraging him to stop smoking, was to help him understand how stupid he was because he smoked. And then another one was, who had a non-smoking spouse, and, it just, the person didn't understand what they were going through, and that this makes it kind of difficult for him to quit, he thinks, because, the spouse doesn't really seem to get what's going on. Well, first thing I have to clarify here is you can never really count, if this is your own quit, you can't count on other people supporting you correctly. You can't count on other people understanding what you're going through. And real bottom line is, it doesn't make a difference whether other people understand it or not. You're fighting a drug addiction. What's important is for you to understand that you're fighting a drug addiction. It is nice if other people understand so they kind of know how to deal with you too, but you can't count on it. You can't count on any other person, even if they were a recovering addict. You don't know what their philosophy is about it. Even though that they're successfully pulling it off, they still may have some pretty bizarre ideas out there that it helped them, but isn't going to help most other people, and wasn't going to help you if you were to adopt the same philosophies that they had. But then when you get the people who just don't get it at all, the good news for them is, again, it doesn't make a difference whether they get it or not. They don't smoke, and as long as they never take up smoking, they don't really ever have to worry about getting it for their own sake. And again, in all honesty, they don't need to get it for your sake. Your sake, it's important that you do get it, though. What you're fighting a carton. You're not fighting a carton. You're not fighting a case. You're not fighting a cigarette. You're fighting a puff. That's the point you have to get. When I was doing clinics, I used to, at times, because I would always call my clinic participants, I would sometimes get family members on the phone. Often spouses, sometimes children, sometimes parents, or if they were really young people in the clinic. But generally, I would get questions from them like they really wanted to know how can they support them. They're in this position where anything they say is wrong. If they asked the person how they're doing, they were pestering them. If they didn't ask the person how they were doing, they didn't appreciate what they were going through. It was really kind of a no-win situation for the family member wanting to be supportive and not knowing how to do it. For those people, I'm going to give a little bit of advice here. People who really want to be well-meaning. You're going to hear at times that the other person, they may be off for weeks, they may be off for months, it could be any time period. And maybe it's only days, but whatever the time period is, every now and then, all of a sudden they're going to blurt out, oh man, could I go for a cigarette right now? Now, when you hear this, understand, you're behind this person not smoking. You really want them to succeed. When you hear this, your defenses go up. They do. It's like, oh my God, I got to stop them from doing it. And you almost go into an attack mode by nature. It's like, you don't want a cigarette. You just want to blurt that out. The problem is, you have to understand, at the moment that this statement is being made, they do want a cigarette. You've now just set yourself up to be in an argument with the person. They're saying they want a cigarette. You want to argue with them saying, no, they don't. And again, you're wrong. At the moment that they made the comment, they wanted a cigarette. Change the tactic with them. Don't argue with them. Don't get alarmed by what they're saying. They've given you the opportunity here to talk. Look at them just very, nonchalantly and say, well, yeah, but how do you feel about all the other ones that go with it? This is what I would always train, in a sense, my clinic participants to do. I would try to get them to understand this internal dialogue. So when they would get the thought, they would talk themselves out of it. Well, when I would get the family member on the phone, I already knew this mechanism was in place. So tap into it. Don't argue with them. Just say, well, yeah, but how do you feel about the rest that go with it and the problems that go with the rest of those cigarettes? See if the person who is in recovery hears that, it's going to make them remember what they're doing and why. And you are now not debating with them whether they wanted a cigarette or not. You're accepting the fact they wanted it, but you're getting them to think about the consequences that have to go with it. It's still going to have to be their final decision whether they take it or not. And again, if you try to get in the way of that decision, they're trying to quit for you. They can't do it. They can't quit to make you happy. I know you may want them to quit to make you happy, but they can't do it. If they start to feel that they're quitting to make you happy, they are depriving themselves of something they want, something that they perceive as good and helpful and just beneficial to them for your benefit. They can't. They have to see it as their benefit. You become a secondary beneficiary of their not smoking, but that can't be the reason. Because if you ever do anything to tick them off, if you ever do anything that disappoints them, they're going to have this retaliatory response. That retaliatory response is, I'm depriving myself of my cigarettes for you. You're not worth it. Look what you just did. And they're going to relapse. And they're going to blame you for it. Now, I want to point something out. If they do, if they relapse and they blame you for it, you got to know something here. It wasn't your fault. They did it. They relapsed. They're the ones who screwed up. They're going to blame you, but, don't accept that blame. It's not your doing. They did it. You can be supportive to a point, but they've got to be the one really being their major advocate in this if they're going to, pull off a long-term success. You do want them to quit. They're your loved ones. You want them to live. You want them to be healthy. You want them to be able to participate. You don't want to be a long-term caregiver to them down the line when they're crippled from smoking. The reason I'm bringing this up is there are times where a person who has quit smoking may get cranky, may get irritable, may lash out, may seem sad, may just have some sort of negative reaction going on, and family members around them, again, well-meaning people, may look at them and think, oh gosh, this really seems bad. It's so bad maybe at the moment you're thinking maybe you should just have a cigarette, and you'll say that. You got to understand what you're saying here. This person is fighting for their life, okay? This person is trying not to smoke, and yet they're having a negative reaction. And your mechanism here of trying to be supportive is saying, maybe you should have a cigarette. Understand what the implication of that comment is. Treat it as if this person was, a cancer patient who was undergoing chemotherapy. Now, again, you understand when a person is a cancer patient and they're going through chemotherapy. They're in really lousy moods. They're having horrible side effects, terrible nausea, terrible vomiting. They're losing their hair. They're often becoming depressed. They're having these horrible, horrible situations. But you don't often find yourself hopefully saying, oh my God, because they're being cranky one day, because they're having, they're mad at you. You hopefully don't find yourself in a position where you're saying, oh God, if this is what you're like, on chemo, well, get off this stuff. Because in a sense, what you're telling them at that point in time is drop dead. You're telling them to stop the medication, which they're taking to save their life. The same thing in a sense is true here. They're quitting smoking to save their life. They're quitting smoking because one of the things they're trying to avoid is getting cancer, which could result in that kind of, chemotherapeutic kind of treatment on there. And to now give them that excuse or that logic, or even to think it yourself, like, oh man, if this is what you're like, you're better off smoking. Again, you're basically saying you're better off killing yourself than me having to live with you like that. Understand what that statement can be interpreted as. And hopefully you'll never find yourself making that statement. Really, internalize this thing big time. They are fighting to save their life. You want to do everything you can to support that decision for them because it is the right decision for them. So are they going to have bad moments, and may they lash out in those bad moments? Yeah, it's possible. But consider the source at that point in time. The source not necessarily being just who that person is, but who that person is in a quitting phase of quitting smoking, especially if this is in the first few days. If this is in the first few days, they're in drug withdrawal. And yes, maybe you never have experienced withdrawal yourself, and maybe you don't understand withdrawal, but believe them. When they say something's wrong, they don't feel well, they're in withdrawal. They're having a real phenomenon here happening, that they're in withdrawal. Their body is demanding nicotine, and they're having to override a body's demand for nicotine. They can do it. They will write it out. And over time, they won't have that demand anymore. There'll still be trigger circumstances causing desires, but not what was happening initially. But those long-term things that can occur, they're going to have more control over them than they may have in the first few days of withdrawal. And what I mean by that, the first few days of withdrawal, they don't have control to the point that they can just stop the feeling. The feeling, it's a natural course. They're having a reaction. They're wanting a cigarette. They're trying to talk themselves out of the cigarette. They still want the cigarette. They will succeed. They'll talk themselves through it. But it's going to take the time for the withdrawal to run its course, for that desire. It's a crave. The body is demanding nicotine. It's going to have to just run its course. Down the line, weeks and months into a quit, when they get the thought, they can squelch the thought. They can squelch it in seconds. The issue now is, how do they squelch it? And the way they squelch it is they focus on the fact that if they take the one, they've got to have the others. They have to accept the consequences of all those others. They don't want those consequences, and thus they can basically stop the desire. They don't want it anymore when they see it as the package deal that it is. Again, that thought process may not take away the urge or shorten the urge in the beginning, but it will in the long term. And that's where you can be helpful. That's where you can say to them, again, simple commentary. It's, yes, you want the one, but do you really want the others that go with it? And remind them what it was like when they quit, or why they quit. That's the important issue. Help them remember why they quit smoking and what their initial reasons were. The more they remember that, the more dedicated they will be to stick with the commitment that they made. Help them understand. If you really want to help them succeed over the long term, it's just a matter of helping them understand that for them to stay free, that they made a commitment a while ago. And if they want to stay smoke-free, again, if they want to stay smoke-free, not that you want them to stay smoke-free, you do, but the change direction at this point. If they want to stay smoke-free, because you know what? They do. They put a lot into this up to that point in time. If they want to stay smoke-free, what they need to do is just remember to stick to the personal commitment that they made to themselves to never take another puff.